Dames en heren, jongens en meisjes.
Hello everybody, my name is Johan from Vrijheidvideo. I'm the host. And we are about to get started in a few minutes. But before we go started, I want to show you something. It's everything to do with you getting interactive with us. It's about to appear in the screen.
Please, Johan, tell them how the fuck did you do that?
Good question. How the fuck did I do this? Yeah. Well, I show you. What you first need to do this, you need a wallet. It's a crypto wallet. And I recommend this one. It's better. There are others, but I recommend this one. Don't get paid for this. But what you saw was a Spice token. It was sent to us by a service called tipbitcoin.cash. And well, if you have a wallet and you have some crypto, you can go there and search for Vrijheidvideo. But there's an easier way, and it's down here. This one is bit.ly/Vrijheidvideo. And let's go to there and see what happens. But first I drink... Yeah, let's go. Alright, here we are in tipbitcoin.cash. You can, this field, on the top you can write down your name. Below that one you can type in a message. Make sure it's an important message. It's your money, so... and everybody who's watching the live stream will hear your message. So make sure it's important. And below that one you can see the field where you type in the amount of money that you want to send. It's in dollars. So I think the minimum is $1 cent and the maximum is whatever you want to send. And you can choose Bitcoin Cash or some kind of token. They have Honk, they have Spice and Leads tokens. So if you have a bunch of them, you can select that one. So we're now going to do the Bitcoin Cash option.
Hartstikke idee, jongens, daar gaan we dan. Hopelijk is dit de goeie. Ja.
Welkom. U luistert naar Vrijheid Radio.
Yes, 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 and yes. Yes, we are talking English now. It will be an entire Vrijheid Radio in English. And we are here today with Rick, Peter, Yoshi, and our special guest, Jordan. And Jordan is a libertarian from Scotland. And I think at the moment he is not sitting there. He's looking... dan kunnen we gewoon even Nederlands praten. Hij is even zijn oplader aan het zoeken. Maar hij komt zo terug, ja. Maar ja, for the English speaking people who are listening right now, we shall continue to talk in English. And hope they understand us. Because my accent might sound like double Dutch, yeah? Yeah. Alright, yeah. Well, we are, let's start with the gold, the bitcoins, and the marijuana index. Shall we start with the oil? Or the... Ik heb helemaal niks bij.
Oil went a lot. Oil is down tremendously with the corona fear and down with the rest basically. It is below 50 now, $47.19 a barrel.
Okay. Yeah, and Bitcoin went down this week.
Although you cannot get contaminated while using Bitcoin for payments, it still went down.
It's much safer than paper money.
Yeah.
Virus-wise.
No viruses. But it went down quite a lot in 1 week, more than 7%. Last night, even in a dip, $300 lower than what we see today. At the moment, we are looking at a euro price of 8,100 euros.
I saw someone in China actually laundering money, literally taking money and putting it in water with soap because of this virus.
The crash tonight was quite steep. Maybe worth to mention, it went down to 7,850 euro in the bottom price of this week. So steep decline.
That's a lot, because like a few weeks ago it was 9,400.
Yes, exactly. So it went down significantly, especially last night was a really big sell-off. That was just, the dollar support was at $9,300, and when that broke, it basically kept on falling. And yeah, I was in the middle of cashing out some Bitcoins myself, and then you always, you hate the delay on the confirmations and everything. But okay.
Yeah. And Jordan,
part of the game.
Hi there, sorry about that. I don't know what happened there, because last time I saw you, I saw that the battery of the laptop was getting low, and I just went to the back of the table to actually just plug on the charger, and I came back round. All of a sudden there was an error screen that came up saying that I needed to wait until the computer had to restart, and of course it's now restarted, but it's been quite excruciatingly slower than normal. So yeah, I'm just trying to see if I can get into Skype via the laptop again to see what happens. So I just need to close some other window programs just so it doesn't disrupt anything else, and I hopefully I can get back in via the main desktop.
Well, we will be here, so yeah. We continue with the marijuana index. Niemand heeft hem voor zich.
Well,
I'm counting on you for that.
Yeah. No, but last time we concluded that maybe we should better follow the psychedelics index, right?
Yeah, but it doesn't really exist yet. The first psychedelic companies are starting, but you cannot really buy shares.
Since there was a pretty big drop this week, and now it's on $85.
Really? Wow, that's very low.
Yep, very, very low. Because
I think everything is dropping, and maybe I read that this fat guy Fisher, not a chairman, but says on CNBC, this is a stock market channel, it's like, time to wean generation of money managers of their dependency on a Fed put. So the Fed put is the idea that the Fed will always jump in when prices drop to print money and pump them up again. And Christine Lagarde from the ECB also said that the ECB was not there right away to bail everyone out. So I think the markets feel a little bit like they're on their own, and the printing press is not backing them. At least not right away. I think in the end they will probably run out of printing press again. But
it may be that the ECB will not keep the interest rate at 0%, because there's been some internal criticism on that. But we'll come to that later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would even be worse if they raise the interest rate. Then the markets really get a hissy fit.
Yeah, well, maybe in the near future, right?
Yeah. But yeah, we have Jordan in our midst. Jordan, can you tell the listeners something about yourself and who you are in short?
Try and keep it as short as possible. But where do you want me to go to? I mean, do I go to where it got to the point of libertarianism, or just where I'm generally aware of the world as of today?
No, just tell who you are.
My name is Jonathan Marini. I am 25 years old from Dumbarton in Scotland. I'm not only just a volunteer litter picker in my local area in the county where I am in Scotland, I'm also a blogger as well as I'm also just a small active member of the Scottish Libertarian Party in Scotland. I ended up getting involved towards the idea of libertarianism overall in particular, because throughout the years, the discussion before, we ended up getting this live on the air. I ended up seeing through certain parts of the political world, particularly in the UK first, with regards to, well, not only recession in 2008, but also in 2010, I felt the election that time, even if I wasn't old enough to vote, I just kind of felt that it, generally speaking, didn't really feel as if any of the above candidates really even spoke out about real issues, and kind of felt apathetic along with my friends and some members of my family as well. And so what happened afterwards, going through 2010 into 2012, then came the Scottish independence referendum. And that's when I began to pick up things exponentially. And then after the result didn't come true in 2014, all the conspiracy theories abound about, oh, the result may have been rigged, which there may be some credit to, but it's not always that certain. Going to 2016, then the EU referendum came along. I started to get red-pilled even more, even if I'd just tuned into certain streams that were shared by one of my guitar teachers at the time, who I used to do guitar lessons with, and used to share some David Icke articles to certain other links, and I thought, okay, wow, this is exactly the way things are going. Then 2016, it really changed my mind about what the European Union was. Instead of some friendly trade bloc that even the independence communities still get told to this day, I learned that the hard way, actually, it's not really that way at all. And going beyond 2016, couldn't really understand why on earth people were just completely, particularly here in Scotland, they kind of felt as if there was something along the lines of, well, the sky is falling and the world was going to end because we ended up deciding, people in the UK decided to vote leave, as well, myself included, voted leave in the referendum. And, well, going to this day, from even learning on my journey what central bank is, I ended up actually coming here to from many other things, and here I am, yep, to this day.
Okay, well, we're happy you're here, and yeah. Yeah.
I'm just going to click on to see if I can join the call again via the laptop, just to see if it's working again. I've just clicked the join call section, and hopefully it's going to load up great. Hopefully I can just join right there, see if I can connect again via the laptop. Okay, it's only just showing the audio there, so I'll just actually try, see if I can load the camera to turn the video on. Yeah, just clicking on there, see if I'm switching on. It's loading up quite slowly.
Okay, there's feedback.
Okay. Okay, so I'm loaded up. I'm just loaded up quickly, albeit mainly just through the hearing me through the audio actually. So if I can the one, just clicking on. Yep. Hey, switch on again. So back to normal.
Okay.
Was there anything you wanted to ask about?
Yeah. Okay. I put you in the right place and in Twitch. Maybe some of you, Peter, Rick, or Josh, you can do the staatsschuldmeter, the natural debt. And I put Jordan on the right spot.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Just find it here. And it's dropping by about 350 euros per second. So that's... Well,
it's like,
we talked about that last time, right? Yeah.
Yeah. It's like 392.2 or something like that. Billion.
21 billion right now.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Okay. What start with news in that case? We have a poll, a political poll. It's about how the Dutch parties are doing.
Yep. Well, since we have national elections next year in Parliament, of course we now start preparing for that and start checking how the different political parties are doing. And as I see it now, there could be a coalition of some right-wing conservative Christian party, and that's about what I can find in combining these different parties that now are that were now polled.
So is this one of the main parties particularly involving that's headed by Geert Wilders?
Yeah, that's one of those parties. Yeah, he's the second largest party in the polls right now.
Some people, particularly, there's a, well, you might not have heard about it, but there was a small parties debate held in Scotland on the 28th of January earlier this year, and one of the main people who took part in the debate, Richard of the Scottish Family Party, did comment about to talking about drugs. That some people, he claimed that there's a trend in the Netherlands to trying to repeal the marijuana and various other drugs because of the rise of, like you describe, of the much more right-wing Christian-based parties. I mean, is this kind of the case in the Netherlands at the moment?
It would like that, but there has just recently been a proposition sent lightly left liberal that suggests that we should legalize all kinds of drugs. So started again, but behind American states, for example.
Right, which ones would that include? Would it include certain ones like California and
for like in the Netherlands, marijuana is not yet legalized officially.
Mm-hmm.
It's condoned officially, so everybody sort of uses it or has the ability to use it, but the trade and the buying of marijuana is very, very limited by law, and of course that's not very practical if you have a business.
Right. I mean, most people wouldn't actually kind of realize that. They would just think that they just mainly think of the Amsterdam model, where they think that, oh well, it's decriminalized and the police are no longer going to come out and stop you. Just if you even local coffee cafes or anything else, and they kind of smell certain things from your breath from a distance away. And it's kind of a bit of a shock, really, that there's still not really a short way to go to actually just let people live and go by their own business to decide what they can do with the cannabis or marijuana.
Yeah. Consumers never really notice anything. But it's more in the businesses that people notice, and when you start growing it for yourselves and you have too many plants, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I would argue that there is actually a live and let live policy at the moment, because as soon as you start to regulate it, that's when you lose the freedom that you have today. And you start to tax the product, and you start to impose how to grow it and all kind of stuff. So although there is no legalization in the Netherlands, the way how they currently run it is a very liberal way of doing it, in a way, you know.
Yeah, but there are still people thrown in jail because they grow too many plants. Yeah.
And the money is stolen on a regular basis also.
How money gets stolen, yeah. And if they have, people in the drugs business have a problem with each other, then they usually they don't go to a judge because it's illegal what they're doing, eh? So they shoot each other. Yeah.
That's true.
But yeah, back to the news. Yeah, the next one we have a few Bitcoin related or crypto related news items. Oh, damn it. My keyboard isn't working very well. Oh, we have some English ones, yeah.
Oh, this one is not, but okay.
But we'll translate. We'll just sort of say what it's about.
Is there any beef between Scotland and Ireland? Because
yeah, there's Irish news, Irish Bitcoin news. The police lost the keys of a Bitcoin wallet from Bitcoins they stole from somebody, and that was because it was on a fishing rod, and the fishing rod was gone. What happened? What?
So thank you for that. I don't mean therefore the beef sort of extends to the sectarianisms of the past, but we'll do away with that. But with regards to Bitcoins and losing in the water, well, what do you expect with regards to computers and water anyhow when they mix with electricity? Yeah.
No, it was a little bit different. Right. It was the private key was written down on a piece of paper which was hidden inside a fishing rod.
A fishing suit, the suitcase for fishing access.
Oh, okay.
That's even worse, by the way.
And that house, and then in time his house and the fishing the codes of the Bitcoin.
Yeah, we talked about this a bit before, right? Like what happens if lost? Like what happens to the Bitcoins? And I think, Peter, you said that, well, the Bitcoins, they still stay in. So the number of Bitcoin market doesn't just count anything anymore.
You can't transfer them anymore. It was, by the way, 53.7 million euros on this.
Yeah. But actually reached that Bitcoin in some way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the money supply shrinks more or less because of that. Beer. That's the first time this happened. And then he threw this hard disk dump to try and find it, and
it's entirely
Force armor.
Maybe at some point when they get a supercomputer, they can unlock it again. But then I think the whole concept of Bitcoin is worthless anyway if you do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably that's the only way to even make it that way. Otherwise, it would just be, well, maybe just a bit of an interesting sports show to see if anybody can try and unlock it in any way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but if you're gonna try that, then there are other addresses that are more interesting. And we, you know,
also stole some Bitcoins of someone they deemed a criminal. And after all these years, they still had not sold it. And it was, I think it was 700,000 when they took it, and now it was 15 million, and they still, and normally they they sell cars they confiscate. That's how their source of income. But now they didn't want to sell it, and their argument was, yeah, but then the Bitcoins would end up in criminals' hands again. They didn't want it. I thought that was a really weird thing. It's like if they steal a car and they sell it again, then are they also afraid that the buyer will be a criminal? What is the point of that? I think they.
Well, it goes back to the same type of framing that we had the last time, right? Where the guy that actually sent bomb letters to certain companies or banks or whatever, and he wanted being paid in Bitcoin. That's a sort of framing that's saying people that want to be paid in Bitcoin are almost always criminals. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, with the recent week of the first week of Julian Assange's court case, I'm not too worried about being called a criminal by the current system.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
We should do a special one day on Julian Assange.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Totally.
Yeah, we got some more news. Yeah, Igor.
You disappeared from view.
Yeah, there's a problem with this browser. It's not responding. Okay, where I get up. But there was an auction of bitcoins by the American police, and that was probably, according to some analysts, it was the reason Bitcoin dropped.
Yeah, they said that it dropped from 10,000 to 9,312 because of this sale of 37 in Bitcoin, $30 million in Bitcoin.
So, like the deliberate action by the government to just a lot of Bitcoins in the market so that it becomes less scarce?
Yeah, they just stole some and then they want to use it, so they sell it. That happened before with the Silk Road also. But if it is like 4,000 Bitcoin, I wonder if that is really the reason for it, because if you look what the daily turnover is, then I think 4,000 is quite limited.
Yes,
so
there's comments that need to be. First of all, the daily turnover is highly manipulated, especially if you count all the Tether volume, because I believe on average, I don't know, I can look at the actual number of this moment, but on average every Tether changes hand 4 times per day, to believe. Let's see, Tether.
It's more often than a coronavirus.
Yeah, market cap of 4 billion and a total volume times per day. Shady sometimes. And
yeah,
then,
of course, if people trade back and forth a lot, then you have a lot of volume, but it doesn't mean that if a new party drop 4,000 Bitcoins in the market, that it doesn't go down. But yeah.
The second thing is that the market is expecting a flow of Bitcoin of 12.5 Bitcoin every 10 minutes. So if there is a certain extra of 4,000, whether it's a police raid that got sold on the market or somebody that's just selling a big because he made a profit somewhere in Bitcoin, then the market is not prepared for that, and it will bounce back. But at that very moment where 4,000 just appear on them, let's say it's a market order, then 4,000 is quite a lot, you know. And that's
53 hours worth of Bitcoin from the mining, if I calculated that correctly.
Yes, but
that's about two and a half days worth of mining gains or mining output.
So if you could buy that, if you could buy it, then you would normally buy it, then probably the price would drop, right?
Yeah, extra supply will drop. It's just a question how much.
Yeah.
But I think my theory is that it dropped because the volume was just low. It was in the past months you saw the volume going down, and then they tried to make a bull run on a lowering volume. Then it doesn't matter what happens, and someday it will crash down. Yeah.
What also needs to be said, as this article is written in a bullish way, it was published when Bitcoin was at 9,100, so just after this dump, and after that moment the price dropped even further to 8.6. So this article is written to make people believe that the bottom is in, but it wasn't at all. We were just on our way down. So the statements in this article is there's too much speculation in that. You cannot make a statement like that.
And there's also another theory, I don't know how to say it in very well in English, but you have all these moving average lines, like the 24 and the 20, and if the price goes up, but then it always wants to go back to that line for a correction. So yeah, that's also a theory.
But for me, as a sort of a crypto noob, right? And you know, you have to explain a lot to me. How does it happen that that the amount of bitcoins actually goes down? Because there are new bitcoins mined like every hour, right?
Yes, and there are lots of lost in fishing suitcases also.
Yeah, people lost the key. Like Peter Schiff,
but you mean like the amount of Bitcoin that is actually available for sale? That's the story you're making. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think also a lot of people die or their computer crashes, or I think passwords get lost. I think that happens quite a lot. I know personally someone who has some Bitcoin still in a wallet, but doesn't have the password of this wallet anymore, and can just look at the summary of how much is in there.
So that works like sort of the same way as that you put all your cash money in some big sock on your Christmas tree, right?
No,
and there you can get it out.
You
or in
put
some
it in
cases here in a bistro, or in some cases here in Western Barnes in particular, in a bistro tin, actually, especially when you try to dump it, when you forget you're actually putting it at the dump. Yeah, a bit of a true story that, because there was a bit of a crazy story here recently where, at the local recycling centre that's close by to where I live, a brother and a sister, an adult, were cleaning out the house of their grandmother who had dementia, out to the place to basically take most of the stuff to the dump. And I've kind of been through this before because my gran ended up getting dementia in the early 2010s, ended up dying in 2016, I think it was. And actually, so I kind of know and feel sorry for the whole process. But in their rush to get all the stuff out and also get the grandmother transferred to the care home because she had dementia, they did not realise. Okay, they were very lucky to actually call the council on time because they run the whole place, because they run both recycling centres in the county where I live. That there apparently was some big life-saving money of up to £20,000 in the tins at the dump. And usually you have to phone them up very quickly because they're going to get crushed very quickly in certain places, or even just be melted down if they're in the metal section, which is where they were put in. And luckily the two guys who ran the dump just reacted very, very quickly with a good instinct, and they just got the whole thing out of there on time. And the story kind of ended up going viral, not just in Scotland, and of course they kind of got made fun of at the local burn supper during one of the speeches when they were mentioned about it, because we kind of all got a good laugh about it. But they also ended up on a national British TV show called The One Show on the BBC, and people kind of ended up knowing about it, and the presenters seemed to be kind of jovial about it because they said, here's some good bistro gravy tins in return as a reward for use.
Yeah, I heard
a police situation and scenario.
I also heard once about a guy who put gold coins away in some a paint tin box, and also in some old paint, and he thought they will never find it there, but he also forgot about it, and then he invited a friend to renovate his house, and his friend saw, there's some old paint, we can't use that anymore, and he threw it all away. Yeah, there goes your gold coins. That it happens sometimes. Yeah.
I have a Bitcoin wallet with 1.8 Bitcoin in it. And of course all the hard forks, like Bitcoin Cash, and it's there for about, I think, 6 years now in the wallet. I forgot the password.
You contribute to the deflation, Johan.
Yeah. Well, anyways.
Now the question is, do you report it for taxes or not?
Yeah. Well, anyway, yeah, inflation has gone too far. That's the next article.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I talked about, right? Like when we are starting the thing about the ECB. And the ECB, they well, not too long ago, they lowered the interest rate to 0%, and now from inside the ECB, there's been some criticism on that, because the thing that happened is it showed that people who actually had savings on the bank, they did not certainly start to invest all that money. They just started saving more money because it took them longer to reach their savings goal. So actually exactly the opposite happened that the ECB was intending. People started saving more money instead of less, and they didn't invest it in the market, and companies didn't invest it in the market. So the only thing that happened is that people got less value for their money. So now within the ECB,
I do think there must have been money invested because the stock market went up a lot in this time. So yeah, there's not just what the people do, but also the the central bank buys with QE a lot of bonds. So yeah, these corporations also often borrow a lot more money and buy their own stock. For example, I know my corporation does it where I work. That's why the stocks went up a lot. So I do think this 0% does have effect, and certainly the QE that they put on top of it. But yeah, there is some strife in the EU. I understood between some countries that are more into a conservative mode for the currency and keep a hard money and a soft money crowd. There's also a little bit of a rift building in the ECB between these two camps. Yeah, it smells a bit like this is an outflow of this rift.
Yeah, but in it.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Okay, Rick.
You go ahead.
Rick, finish.
Well, the thing is that in any way, if the interest rate goes up or it goes down, nobody actually gets a say in that. The ECB is just a sort of an independent organization that is not really influenced by any government or normal people or companies whatsoever.
I do think that if the markets really crash, then they will do what they always did, and that is lower interest rate and print money and buy whatever goes down to make it go up again, or to stabilize it, or they nationalize it. It is more or less a nationalization of the economy by the printing press,
or maybe even just print off specially drafted reserves, to maybe make way for the all-planned world currency. Because I did kind of read that up in one of what was that guy again? That's one of the main economists that has been.
I think you mean.
I think there was an American economist who kind of predicted about. It's the main book is called. I know the book is called "The Road to Ruin" as well. Mm. I think he's done other books, particularly with regards to defending gold, and he's been warning about how the economy could end up crashing. He did describe in his book that "The Road to Ruin" about how potentially the plan is to actually have the economy deliberately crash around the world, and the solution be given, particularly from some certain places like the IMF and maybe even the UN as well, to print what's specifically known as a specially drafted reserve, to basically have every single country in the world accept it maybe as a one world international currency. I mean, Dominic Frisby, one of the libertarian comedians in the UK, has even had his own blog talking about this as well in Money Week. He's actually kind of had the theory that potentially this could happen as well.
Yeah, the special drawing rights. They definitely would like to have a global currency, but I wonder if people would buy that one more time because they all failed, and they couldn't join together, and then they claim it will succeed. I think it most of all can buy them some time. We can maybe tag on another 10 years before the new system is also completely a mess.
But how is that in Scotland? Actually, was it in the news that that the big banks they actually lowered their interest rates, or maybe just counted the negative interest rate? That's what some of the big banks did in the Netherlands.
Well, generally here, there's not been much out of the banking news as of yet, apart from mainly just checking up and saying, look, we're just really keeping things stable for now. Maybe at times they may lower it a bit, but mainly that's been nothing really coming out of here, apart from the discussion about the latest budget that's ended up passing through the Scottish Parliament as well, because some of the main issues, I have to say, the main issues passed by the current SNP, Scottish National Party, and the Scottish Greens coalition government is to include, I have to say, much more socialised policies in regards to what they're passing. But one of the main deals they ended up getting to was to have about 80 million to mainly cost the taxpayer 80 million pounds. Well, they claim it's 16 million. Of course, many people are saying actually it's even higher, 80 million, to have free bus travel for people aged under 19 to go on the bus for free. So unfortunately, it's not a big cost to the taxpayer. Another, many libertarians claim themselves would probably call it the great robbery.
So, but there are no commercial banks that have actually lowered the interest rate on savings accounts.
As far as I'm concerned, nope, nothing's really happened. But nothing's really happened as of yet.
Okay.
Talking about free public transport, that's our next article. Because in the Netherlands there's some parties want not only free public transport for the elderly, but also for the kids.
Yeah, this is this whole thing of free. I had to laugh a little bit when I read it. There's some party who says, yeah, the old people should have free public transport. And then someone else says, yeah, and free the kids as well. And then, yeah, why not free everyone and then make everyone free, everything free, just a free food also and everything free. Just have ration coupons again to buy stuff. It is so ridiculous. Yeah, they do everything to destroy the whole pricing mechanism to indicate what is needed and what is useless.
I don't remember who said this, but
GroenLinks, Judith Brokhoven.
Yeah, I know about this one, but there was a certain quote from, I think from a socialist who said, well, actually, if the whole world would be socialist or communist, we would still need one country that to actually know what things cost.
Yeah. Apparently in the Soviet Union or in Eastern Germany, they looked at Western Germany for prices because they didn't have a clue what kind of prices to put on there. Only one supplier and everything in monopoly.
Isn't it?
That still costed money, but there you did have the money, I think, but the shops were more or less empty. So if there was something available, you had to stand in line.
Yeah, like the older people among us who still remember the 80s, right? When there was on the news, there were these lines in front of the bread section in the supermarket in Russia. And if you were too late, you just had bad luck, right?
Yeah.
Also, if you are in the line, you had bad luck. I mean, only the first ones in the line had luck. The last people in the line, they were waiting for nothing.
It must be very frustrating if you're waiting in line for 3 hours and still don't get it.
Yeah, but
I think we jumped one message, right? Or did you switch them around?
Yeah, the Uber protest. Yeah.
Well, then maybe we jump too, but the Uber protest is interesting as well.
Oh, wait, yeah. Sorry.
Freedom is bad for your health.
Yeah,
right.
It's bad for your health. According to whom?
To a psychiatrist. Her name is Esther Fina, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
She posted her opinion like in the big national newspaper, right? The Volkskrant, it's called, like the Catholic, but anyway, she
It wasn't
she
in
said
the Labor newspaper.
the Volkskrant.
Volkskrant.
That used to be the Catholic one. So.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But anyway, the content of the message was that she said too much freedom is very unhealthy for you, and then she's of course referring to people with a lower social economic status, as we normally would call them probably. Make choices that are very unhealthy. They eat and do. So those people, they run a higher risk at vascular diseases and heart diseases and cancer and that kind of thing because of the unhealthy things they eat. And to me, that would be she. People should actually be slightly forced to make the right choices, and to me, it is just a matter of informing them better and giving them the liberty to actually make those choices, but decollectivizing the health system, right? People would insure themselves individually instead of having the collective system. But this is sort of like the normal way of thinking about these things by people more on the left. A few people that side.
They have a picture also here.
I think that it's a bit like every single member of the population. We kind of refer to them here as junkies and Neds, as if everybody's kind of like that. If you don't know what the term Neds means, it's basically non-educated delinquent. It means here, and typically, these characteristics of these people are not only taking drugs, particularly heroin, but also the Neds in particular, non-educated delinquents would either start wearing some of the worst dressed clothes of all time, like wearing caps or even putting socks above the trousers and the shoes, and even just wearing the typical sports jackets, and kind of have all these like nasal like kind of voices and that. Because I kind of recommend watching the film Neds by Peter Mullen at some time to do so, to understand particularly the Glasgow culture about it. And sometimes particularly would either be drinking butt fast or just getting involved in fights with other people, trying to pick fights or rob them, particularly using that. Psychiatrists like her, we kind of think, effectively like the whole population, not just anywhere, not just in the Netherlands, but kind of anywhere that would try and take up any kind of freedoms, even if we're peace-loving individuals like us, we sort of ended up fitting along those lines. To that, so it's kind of rather patronising, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very patronizing. Also, the picture that has this article has, you see a woman with very fat legs, the 600-pound woman who took part in the slimming down program has died. She became 28 years of age. And that is a kind of idea that, people are stupid and they need a wise government to look after them and to prod them into the right direction. Otherwise, stupid things. But they never forget that these same vote for the government. So, if stupid anyway, then they vote for stupid people. To fat food. The government itself is made out of people, and if people are idiots, then the people in government will also be idiots. So how will these smart people find their way to this democratically elected government? That is very, but it is a battering ram to against freedom again. So like freedom of opinion and religion and all other kind of freedoms, and they all try to discredit it.
Yeah, it's kind of a bit like the whole debate that was going on last year in particular with, we had a bit of a similar scenario with, well, there was a situation at the end of August in Glasgow. These, generally would call them extremist groups, both on the side, the Protestant, we have the loyalists on the Protestant side, and there was the others, the Irish Republicans, well, so-called Republicans on the Catholic side, who ended up completely fighting each other in the streets of Govan after holding protests within the law, and there was riots, big riots going about. The police ended up having to bring the riot gears in. People were frightened about it. Interestingly, we had one of the main talking shows, radio in Scotland, called talking. Ended up having to call in to defend free speech as a result. But they were saying in the question that about time that all marches and parades got banned from Scotland streets because we particularly with the pro-independence marches, if some people would actually know about it. And I was one of mainly the first caller in to say, look, I really don't like those, big bad extreme groups. I don't want to have any loyalty to them whatsoever. Way of thinking is not really aligned with theirs. But to try and justify cancelling every kind of march and parade to have people voice their dissent really towards the government is absolutely ridiculous. And the presenter, Ali Bali, of the show started to try and make excuses of, well, don't you think because Police Scotland's resources are being cut and people are complaining that, it's a disruption in life and it's hatred everywhere. I mean, don't you think there should be a justified crackdown on it? I mean, it's like, well, no, because our actual democratic right to freedom of expression really has to be kind of upheld. You don't necessarily have to agree with one another as to what it should be, but that's really what the case is. And I never forget listening to the radio and continually for that time, most of the callers, when they were absolutely ripping into me, saying, oh, how can you justify siding with those haters? And well, I'm like, okay, come on, you didn't actually. I was like, well, I wasn't on the call at the time, but I could be screaming at the radio at that point, saying, well, how on earth could you claim that I'm siding with those, extreme idiots who think it's okay to fight in the streets and fight each other, when all I was talking about was, we all have a democratic right to have our say. If anything, the police need to actually start defending our right to free speech, unless it's really a direct call to violence. People even more, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's a bit right that he says you shouldn't have to agree with someone to actually be a defender of somebody's free speech.
Mm-hmm.
Read this passage here. You can by now without limits is a risk going down as a society. Certainly for people, think groups with little education, low social economic class, and difficulty. I think difficulty of central bankers and politicians who immediately join the Iraq invasion, and born addiction, neiging, tendency to addiction. So the politicians are all addicted to tax money, and then it goes on the dark side of the wealthy but silent society that under the guise of freedom neglects each other. That's how we are doomed to go down to an overkill of borderless freedom. And this kind of tendentious dribble it's just propaganda against freedom that makes people who read it like, oh, please shackle me. Yes,
well, I don't really believe in freedom at all if you actually try to go against anybody else's life and property. I mean, she clearly seems to forget that.
Yeah. Well, they always feel they themselves are in the elite. So because they said, especially people who are badly educated, lower socio-economic class and stuff, not us, who are the elite and who control everything from the top, that we of course make all the right choices.
Who reads this newspaper?
Yeah, that's a well, they're still selling, so someone is reading it.
Quite a lot, yeah.
Yeah, but then we have the protest against Uber. Yeah, because freedom on the taxi market. You don't want that, huh?
No, it's like at first when I read this, I thought that the regular taxi drivers, so that have a regular permit that's legalized and everything, so not the Uber drivers, were protesting. But now actually it appears that the Uber drivers themselves are protesting because they want higher wages, and the regular taxi drivers have joined them Because probably they would get a better position in the market, so they could compete more easily with the Uber drivers.
But in the Netherlands, Uber drivers have to have a taxi license also, I think. You cannot just jump in a car and become an Uber driver in the Netherlands.
That's true. There's a certain type of driver that's actually allowed in the Netherlands, and it's not the same kind of Uber driver or same kind of Uber subscription that you have in other countries, where you can actually have your own car and just drive around and pick up people as long as you have the Uber app on your telephone and are registered.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's this kind of special Uber subscription you have in the Netherlands, but still they're cheaper than regular taxi drivers. And now those Uber drivers are actually calling for higher wages. So in this way they found each other while they're normally on the opposite side of the spectrum.
Yeah, unholy coalition. That's I wrote an article recently about it that is referring to another article called Bootleggers and Baptists. And it's a landmark article where these coalitions are described between the two different camps that find themselves in banding together for legislation to help both of them out.
Yeah, it's purely opportunistic, right? And then at a certain point they will be like protesting against each other again. But for now they're together.
Yeah.
Very interesting, and I just see the new legislation coming, right, where they actually, the Uber drivers are just another taxi company, regular taxi company in the Netherlands, and it just has the name Uber.
And Uber says, the drivers who are really active for us make 24 euros an hour. I think that is quite a good pay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then the government steps in and take half of it.
Yeah, that becomes less.
They should protest against the government, against the taxation.
Yeah, but I think the only real difference in the end becomes that Uber drivers, they drive in their own car, and taxi drivers, they probably drive in the car that belongs to the company, or they rent from the company, so the actual ownership of the car lies somewhere else. But that's about the only difference.
But in the Netherlands, can Uber drive their own car?
Jordan?
So you want me to talk?
Joshi said something.
Joshi. Okay, sorry.
First comment of the night. No. Okay. But this depreciation of the asset of the car is a huge difference, because this 24 euro per hour has to pay for a new car in approximately 3, 4, maybe 5 years maximum.
Yep.
But do they drive their own car? These Uber drivers in the Netherlands?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, that's the whole idea of Uber.
All costs are for the driver. So you can, it's like takeaway.com for a restaurant. You can start whatever you want with your own restaurant, and then they are only the intermediate. They connect the customer and the taxi driver, and that's it. And take 10%.
But of course, I would say that they don't have to work for Uber. First they choose to work for Uber, and then they complain that the wages are too low. If they can make a calculation themselves and say it's not worth it to me, and then not go to Uber headquarters with a megaphone, because it's the customers anyway who are deciding to either take public transport or take a taxi. If the price goes up, then the customer price goes up, then they stop taking a Uber.
Right.
So
that's the whole idea of that price spiral, that it just becomes more expensive, and in this case people actually have an alternative, which is public transport, especially in Amsterdam, where Uber is most active.
Yeah, and in most cities, like if you go to Kiev, then I can go from anywhere to anywhere in the city for 3 euros. And of course prices are lower there, but it's not that much crazy lower. And still these people, they often have a very old car. But I don't mind a very old car, and I don't think that it depreciates a lot anymore. Like my own car is like I have a car that also does not depreciate anymore. Just a little maintenance.
Yeah.
You should come, Peter, because the taxi ride here only costs you €1 and you can go anywhere in the village.
That's even cheaper.
For Jordan Liebrand, huh?
Yeah.
He lives near Lieberland, Yoshi.
In Serbia,
20.
right?
Serbia.
20 kilometers away, yes.
Uh,
Have you heard of that project? Now that you mention it, Johan, I want to know.
Liberland. Jordan, have you heard of the Liberland project or Liberland?
Yeah, I've actually quite read up quite a bit of it, really, about Lieberland. For most of the years, I kind of thought it was a bit of a meme, really. But over time, I actually started looking on Wikipedia as to what it really was. And, I can't believe the son and, bravery of this guy that decided to set up the whole but actual just mini micronation of Lieberland to have what probably should be a genuine, real democracy involving free markets and the ability for people to just live and let live amongst each other and not really to oppress each other. But it's a pity that certain other two governments nearby seem to kind of get jealous of competition.
No, not at all. How do you
Serbia,
say
not
that?
Croatia.
No, they are very friendly towards us here.
Yeah, but when I was there, Yoshi, there was this boat with this machine gun that didn't want to go on Lieberland.
That doesn't sound very friendly.
That was a Croatian boat.
Yeah, that's Croatia, yeah. Serbia has no problem with Lieberland. Yeah. But Lieberland is occupied by Croatia now. Yeah. But anyways, we go to the Black Pete discussion because it fell early this year. Jordan, do you know about Black Pete?
I've not quite any idea of what Black Pete is. Can you fill me out about it?
That's a Dutch blackface tradition. Now, we have Santa Claus, and Santa Claus has these little helpers who are dressed.
They don't need to be little.
No, they don't need to be little. Yeah.
They're never little, actually.
No, they're a bit odd, and they have black faces.
Well, if Trudeau can do it, so can you. I mean, so therefore, you're entitled to free
Yeah,
to do that.
they're all impersonating Trudeau.
Yeah, they're impersonating Trudeau. Yeah. Yeah, but there are some people who are offended. They are very offended.
Yeah, well, we talked about Carnival last time, right? That there was a public school that actually wanted to change the name of Carnival to just a fancy dress party because they were not Catholic, and they said Carnival has a Catholic tradition, so we don't want it as a public school. And now I predicted then that there would be some people that would actually get offended by the Carnival tradition, and just other people being offended that they could no longer use the term Carnival. And now there's actually somebody from the Geert Wilders party, right? She's a fan of that party, and she says, "I respect people that think in another way than I do." But apparently I'm a racist when I'm all for Black Pete and some other words that actually offend those people. So in the Dutch language, there's now a certain kind of language battle going on between people that have used certain words for a long time and that can now no longer use them because other people are offended by those words. And those words mostly have a reference to some type of ethnicity or some type of belief, and people, they just have used these words for decades, maybe hundreds of years, and never really meant anything by them. But now they get a certain connotation as if they are bad, right?
Yeah, we had the Moorish hat. It was some the chocolate thing.
Yeah, some chocolate cake, right?
Yeah. And what was the other thing?
Negerzoen.
Oh yeah, the nigger kiss. It was also something like that. Yeah.
It was just sort of a chocolate cookie with whipped cream inside it, right? But nobody ever thought of that would be racist or something. But now it's certainly the shops are no longer selling them. They have renamed it. Now they're just called kisses, right?
But I think the problem is that in this war, whenever they change a word or make a word taboo, and everyone moved to a different word, and the word they prescribed for everyone, then that word becomes taboo also. And then they move on to another word again, and that way they always you always are following, because whatever you is too late, and it is racist or phobic, or and then then you have to move again to another word.
Yeah, for me that feels like a sort of language totalitarianism, right? that only certain words are allowed.
Yeah, who knows if you'd have to try and maybe have the job of translating Dave Chappelle's recent comedy routine into they'll definitely double down offending even more people now and then.
Yeah, but it's not. It's also not just with racial groups or something, or ethnicities, because they also had it with like blind. You cannot say blind anymore. That was visually challenged or visually handicapped, or there's lots of words that keep changing.
Wait, you can't even say the word blind in the Netherlands anymore?
Not really. Well, of course you can say it as a condition, but you cannot refer to. You can, of course, but it's frowned upon when you call somebody a blind person.
Okay, this is getting really, really silly. It's
it's gotten silly a long time ago.
Yeah, I've no issue if somebody refers to, well, if somebody decided to try and say, if somebody ordinarily tries to say, oh no, you're a retard, I don't really get offended by that particular word at all, because, well, that word only just means idiot. When people say, people didn't really used to say the word bastard at all, because it usually used to mean, in its original definition, somebody was born to unmarried parents. But they seem to normalise it, particularly here, because it just means you're an idiot, just because we say that. But yeah, it is starting to sort of have a battle of catching up, and people don't really want to dare even say much, because somebody would end up getting offended. And it's kind of funny, really, because if someone else, particularly my friends, start using the word retard, even if it's just to quote something out of comedy routine or comedy film, my mother would end up overhearing it saying, "Oh no, you can't say that about disabled people. No way, can't say that." And I'm like, "Come on, Mum, they're not really referring to disabled. They're not really referring to disabled people like us. They're just referring to plain old idiots. That's it."
Yeah, but it's like a few broadcasts ago, we just talking about these sort of satirical cartoons, right? Where, like for example, if you offend the Prophet Muhammad, and then certain people would bring out a death threat, or like Charlie Hebdo, that was 5 years ago, where some person actually started shooting people because they made too many satirical cartoons. Well, that's when it starts getting serious. I mean, I can have a discussion with somebody and disagree, but if you start shooting people, then it becomes really serious, right?
Yeah, deadly serious.
Yeah.
But is it also in Scotland? Do you have also this kind of cultural or language battles?
In terms of the language battle of political correctness, I mean, yeah, unfortunately, the people here seem to be very passive when accepting, word changes, and they're told. Well, one crazy example last year was this Labour MP, MSP for the Scottish Parliament for Edinburgh South, decided to, change the present term from offenders, because that's what we have to refer to them, as criminals, to basically, I don't know, I think the new term was reformed persons. And I was like, okay, this is absolutely insane. Like, I mean, I even did suggest on the radio in Scotland's Talk, when I did not resist phoning in about it, that he should maybe try moving to Canada if he wants to express his political correctness motives right there. So, and of course, nobody laughed about it. So, and it's interesting how, well, there is kind of a rise in the number of people here deciding to try and speak the old Gaelic language as well, because interesting, there's been freedoms fought, particularly in the Western Isles, for school children to basically have the right to speak Gaelic and not be subject to any, disgraceful bureaucratic laws that would end up punishing them if they, well, just in some circumstances, the light circumstances like seeing how the parents may not be fit to look after them if they were to learn it. But still, unfortunately, only about 1% of the population does learn that. But with regards to learning certain things, I mean, generally there is some resistance to it because people say, this is political correctness going mad. But with the way things are going now, people just happily accept being told, look, you can't say the terms that, well, you can't really say the terms, well, people don't really refer to, black people as black people anymore because unfortunately they would be accused of, being racist. And same thing really if, there's this one guy in, I think it was in Mearns, Aberdeenshire last year that decided to basically annoy his teacher by saying, look, he said in a calm way, there are only two genders, because the teacher got fed up with the idea that the school's policy said there was more than one gender, and he ended up getting completely triggered about it, saying, look, he was basically saying to this guy, look, I'm not saying that the thing you said is less than inclusive. I'm not saying that the policy is less than inclusive. I'm just saying your opinion is less than inclusive. And it was caught on video, and he ended up being, unfortunately, not just suspended, but eventually expelled because the head teachers at the top of the tree ended up saying, look, this can't happen anymore. And there's been a crazy thing happening also with Nicola Sturgeon, the dear leader, First Minister of our country, taking exemption to being nicknamed Jimmy Cranky by the people who, we tend to call them unionists, but they're the ones that oppose Scotland going independent, because they would say on certain columns like, oh look at what Jimmy Cranky is doing there, because it refers to a comedy act, a Scottish comedy act that are known to do pantomimes here in Scotland since the 80s, and they're still popular to this day. Where she ended up, well, contrary to a few years ago when she was interviewed by the Scottish presenter and comedian Tam Cowan about it, and she laughed it off, saying, "Oh, it's not worrying at all." Nowadays, she's starting to go, "Well, actually, do you know what? It's seen as abusive now. I really want these people to shut up and not actually say anything else," which is, well, again, really crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit like Orwell already discussed it with English language and propaganda, and how language is such an important part of propaganda. And he had Newspeak mentioned, 1984, and there especially things are turned completely upside down, and that is, you'll also see that quite often, that good is bad and black is white and the other way around, and war is peace and freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength, and all that kind of stuff. So I think language is a very important battleground in this whole propaganda war. But sometimes I also believe that you can try to fight it. It just you get an enormous amount of hostility over you. But if you give in, it kind of destroys itself also, because in the end, the smaller and smaller fractions are fighting over smaller and smaller details of language, and they start hating each other, and they more or less eat each other. The revolution eats each other.
Yeah, even with the bad laws created, like with the hate crime laws we have here. I mean, one particular example I forgot to bring up was about Count Dankula as well. The guy that taught as a prank to annoy his girlfriend, he ended up teaching his pug called Buddha to raise its right paw every time he said the terms "gas the Jews" or even "Sieg Heil" and that. And even though it got 3 million views on YouTube, someone ended up complaining. Well, it transpired actually, according to him, that the complaint was actually from Police Scotland's hate crime department, which was a bad thing. And he ended up getting fined £800. So unfortunately, the way language is policed with the hate crime laws is if the victim, particularly if they're an assigned minority group, ends up perceiving something as being hateful. Yeah. So if any of us were to make, for example, jokes about, let's say, trans people, for example, and some trans rights campaigner or transgender person, man or lady, decides to get offended and complain about it, then they actually have the right to contact, whether it be Police Scotland or even just some other police force in the rest of the UK, to say, oh look, they've committed a hate crime because they've said these things and you need to punish them. And unfortunately, because of the strength of the so-called pro-LGBT lobby groups, they unfortunately end up going ahead with that instead of telling the people get a life. And it's interesting how I saw an example of a consultation last year on hate crime in Scotland. The end result, because 90% of those responded, including myself, were the individuals. 64% of them said, look, we don't want any further expansion of hate crime laws because it would infringe on freedom of religion, freedom of expression. But unfortunately, with the other 10% of the organisations that overwhelmingly supported it, well, I think it's your wild guess as to what the Scottish Government, as of last year when they did reviewing the laws to be passed, who they ended up siding with. So yeah, it's still quite an ongoing battle.
Yeah, I think even a minority of people can have a large amount of obstruction force, as some sociologists in the Netherlands calls it. They can actually disturb public life in such a way that politicians need to do something with it, even if they're not the majority.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's no excuses if they are, whether you're assigned something that you're in a demographic that happens to be in the majority or even just in the minority. I mean, it's strange how people seem to have stopped observing the traditional teachings of Martin Luther King in his famous "I Have a Dream" speech, where it's supposed to be about character, not the colour of somebody's skin or any other identity.
Mm-hmm.
True.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but a lot of other news items. Here's one. Dutch government lost track of 2.3 million people in the labor force. Jordan, we are a country of 17 million people. That's a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm guessing maybe another 9/11 would happen soon.
Yeah.
No, but like the 2.3 million, they were seasonal workers, so they're all foreigners, right? They don't have to register where they live, so. But
and
still, 2.3 million is quite a bit.
It's since 2014, so I don't know until when, because it doesn't say that, but it's probably more than 1 year.
And it's also the same persons maybe several times.
Yeah, but then still it would be 400,000, and that's quite a lot, especially if you want to collect taxes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that I think is the most remarkable out this thing. So they only need this registration number, but then the government loses track if they leave again. And it said, however, that also means nobody can check whether they are being exploited or mistreated.
Oh, yes.
And of course,
because they did at one point have that number, and they are only lost because they were once in the system. So these 2.3 million have been registered previously. Then the registration expired because their job ended. There is no obligation for these people to let anybody know where they are going next, so they don't. And that's the number we are looking at in this article.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I think that the term we cannot check whether they are being exploited or mistreated is especially nasty, because the only thing the Dutch government wants to do is exploit people.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Because that's why they give you this number to begin with, because they want to exploit you for your salary. Yeah.
It would also suggest that that slavery is still going on today, as if those people did not come here voluntarily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It would certainly be be strange if they came back also.
Right. Please exploit me.
Yeah, I want to be exploited again.
Yeah,
but nowadays I don't know if you follow the Weinstein case. Weinstein was this rape, this movie director, rape accused at least, was condemned. But you had a psychologist there, and she also testified with Bill Cosby, and she was there to explain why certain victims of rape still go back to their rapist and become a girlfriend later on. So, and they would still be raped then. So,
Yeah. It's the Stockholm syndrome, right?
Yeah.
yeah, that is how I would describe it. That makes it very hard to detect a rape case, I would say also, because then someone could say, yeah, but we saw you with this guy on a party and you were hanging
Peter,
out, and, but you also claim to be raped by him. But how does this work?
I'm so
but
glad.
the same is it for these exploited workers. They maybe they are exploited and they can still come back later on voluntarily, but that doesn't mean that they were not exploited the previous.
Peter, you have just explained trauma because you have cleared for me that I can rape myself. So now I know why I have all these psychological problems.
And you can keep doing it and get compensated for
I
it.
keep on going, especially when the spring is starting again.
Yeah. I think it is a bit of a affront to real rape victims and real people who are being exploited, that you do this psychological acrobatics to to get to exploitation that's voluntary and a rape that involves being a girlfriend part of the time.
Yeah, unfortunately, this has also been a bit of a cover, really, particularly if you push the cases of one particular minority into the mainstream media to cover up something else as well. Because I mean, kind of looking into the hashtag #MeToo cases as well. With I did see one case out of California as well, where this boy band member called Ricky Garcia of a little-known boy band called Forever in Your Mind came forward to claim that he was actually sexually molested by a few Disney producers that were working with him and his other friends, who not only bribed them with alcohol, but then proceeded to sexually molest them when they were kind of least expecting and they were loosened up. So it's kind of taken some time, and it really does end up covering up other cases. Like Scotty Feldman actually ended up saying one time, the number one problem in Hollywood is not really just to do with the raping and groping of men and women. It's really just paedophilia as well, because that really is the number one problem that is happening within companies like that.
In Disney, you mean? Yeah, I would assume that pedophiles would go to a place like Disney. That would be rational.
Very high in the hierarchy of the politics, because there you are also untouchable.
Yeah, they go to places where they are untouchable.
Yeah.
Work for the how you call it, the United
UNICEF or something.
Yeah, UNICEF or the other one. United
Nations.
Yeah. Yeah. But by the way, Jordan, you when we had contact on Twitter, you were also talking about this English celebrity who committed suicide.
Yeah, I think I referred to Caroline Flack as well, because I think it's still within the topic of free speech as well, talking about that. Well, to begin with, she was a famous TV presenter who I kind of personally knew growing up, just mainly watching on television, of course, when she was on certain TV shows, and she was very bubbly, very funny person, as well as also very good looking to everybody else as well. And she ended up going on to present various other shows within ITV, particularly with the I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here Now, which was a spin-off from The Real Show, and the Extra Factor spin-off from The X Factor, and also in recent times on a show called Love Island as well. And what happened on 15th of February 2020 was there was a breaking news piece that came out that said that she committed suicide at the age of 40 and in a house in London. And she ended up, of course, this shocked quite a huge amount of people across the UK, because it was very unexpected because of the very character described. And she was in the middle of a court case, because kind of bringing up the #MeToo era thing again. She was apparently caught. Well, she apparently was reported for assaulting her boyfriend in the property they were living in, and police were called, and the media ended up jumping on it as always, because they always do with everything. If a public figure is involved, if they hit somebody, they commit a crime, that's when they have a duty to do that. And it seemed that she couldn't really handle everything that was going on, and she ended up taking her own life. But what's happened since then is various people have taken to the media not only to just virtue signal, but kind of beg the British government to not only call for media so-called regulation, which it technically means to ban freedom of speech as well, but it means to also end anonymity on the internet, because no kidding you about it. There was this petition, well, they tend to somehow nickname it Caroline's Law, where they not only call for media regulation, well, part of it says that there needs to be an end to so-called unreliable sources, which technically would, in translation, mean the end of probably keeping whistleblowers anonymous, or even crime victims anonymous, because I don't think they've taken that into consideration, but with the emotions flowing through their heads, they're not really seeing it that way. Then there's also about not wanting to push false information. Well, unfortunately, we've heard that many times before, which means to basically have the government set up a Ministry of Truth to dictate what exact facts it declares are facts and other things it declares are false. And then, of course, there's the controversial section about press intrusion, which doesn't just involve the property, but also involves out and about with regards to permission, for people wanting permission to be on camera or to be photographed or filmed. And this would actually kind of end up ending journalism as a whole, including the mainstream media. And unfortunately, with the petition regards to it, the last time I checked, it was kind of close to about 850,000 people signing it. So what we've got is a situation now where people, you create some, I'm not saying therefore the event would be created, but it can be also exploited to, because that is the main technical word here, to push a different agenda of what you want the people to react with in terms of problem, reaction, solution. So you get the reaction of, oh my gosh, look what's happened here. We need to call for new regulation here in order to, well, really their main begging point is to get rid of the pain they're suffering as much as possible, rather than that in the short term, rather than actually dealing with things in the long term. So unfortunately, if this ends up going through and to come into law, then unfortunately there's the end of not just the free press in the UK, but there would also be an end to, not effectively being able to have your privacy on the internet, because they would demand that you put on both your name and address in order to basically verify who you are on the internet.
Yeah, I think this comes dangerously close to having only state-regulated news items, for example, or state-regulated information, and that the stream only comes from the government, and that is the true news, right? And everything everybody else said is fake news.
Yeah.
I think that directly relates to the next news item we have, right? Like that Dutch companies, they sort of financed for on end. They financed a prominent climate skeptic.
Yeah.
And the first thing I thought was, how is it that you only see that part of the picture where prominent climate activists, they are also financed for years on end, but then by different people, right?
Yeah.
And we have this government institution called the RIVM. It's sort of an institution for the environment and public health. That's just an agency of the government, and they're supposed to be independent, or at least they're supposed to be checked by an independent institution. But that institution that checks them, that only has people in it that are named by other government institutions. So it's not independent in any way. And I think just last week or 2 weeks ago, we were talking about a farmers union, sort of a farmers organization that did their own research and then discovered that the same RIVM they use different norms for the industry and for farmers. So certain big industries, they were not included in the tests they did, because they were under a certain ceiling, that certain level of measurement that they did. So they were comparing two very entirely different things.
Yeah, it sort of is a bit like Ofcom in a way, because the government claims that Ofcom, the main media regulator for television and radio in the UK, is supposed to be independent, but never. But as time has proven over time, never usually is. And with the new head of Ofcom, used to be the head of the diversity and inclusion department. It seems things probably are going to get even worse with regards to Ofcom. I mean, the UK government now, as of this year, wants Ofcom to basically take over and regulate the internet as well, with regards to telling companies that they need to get rid of so-called harmful content, because they would be perceived that, because people would be complaining just like the traditional way with television and radio. It kind of reminds me of a conversation I had several years ago in Media College in Clydebank in 2012, and I only went there for a year. And I met this English radio DJ who was experienced in Kenya called Greg, and he ended up explaining just how Ofcom works, and it's kind of shocking to me when I found out about it. He ended up saying, he tried to give me a bit of a guessing game as to, how many people does it take to complain in order for Ofcom to start an investigation? And I gave all these, endless guesses of, double-digit numbers of how many people, or even triple-digit numbers of how many people are required. And his reply instantly was 1. It just takes one complaint to be sent to Ofcom, and then for them to be just launching an investigation. And in recent years, particularly with people complaining about, unfortunately, the mainstream media complains about certain other alternatives like they say things like, it's a very biased propaganda news channel, we got to fine them. And usually we find that they're under pressure from usually government ministers to take action because of, their perceived fears about propaganda. And most of the time it's usually alternative news. Not saying those channels are perfectly perfect all the time, but they do have a much more alternative viewpoint, and they most of the time do tell real news with regards to most other things like foreign policy and stuff.
Yeah, true. Yeah, but we have to continue. We go now to some climate news. We had already some climate skeptic, but here is also a news item about polar bears. They are becoming cannibalistic because of the melting North Pole.
I thought they were more polar bears.
To take it away, Peter.
Yeah. We had already these spiders who were becoming angry, and birds that were shrinking, and horses that were eating less grass because of the... This is another one. Okay, Peter, go ahead, it's all yours.
The polar bears are starting to cannibalize each other, and they have a nice picture with it. You see two polar bears with their mouth open towards each other, like which I think there's some dead seal lying there, so they have something to eat, and I think they're kind of discussing who gets the first bite of this seal. Bit of intimidation, but they have decided that cannibalism, that polar bears are eating each other now because of global warming, because their environment has been drastically shrinking because the melting pole ice, which I believe was at a 7-year high recently. So, but yeah, it's always, they have these strange comparison. Also, once someone said the dog eats dog capitalism. That is a term they often use to describe the bad side of capitalism. Dog eat dog capitalism. And someone remarked like, yeah, but dogs don't eat dogs. It's a weird, super strange metaphor to so here now polar bears are also supposedly eating each other. And we had before that the polar bear population was drastically reduced because of global warming. And then someone started counting, and then there were more polar bears than ever. And then they moved over to penguins, and then they said, yeah, but the penguins, there's a terrible for the penguins are dying because of global warming. And then they also started counting that. So the fact checkers are kind of behind on this, and now we have cannibalism for polar bears. And I think, at some point of a year from now, you will learn that it's bullshit.
Well, the whole polar bears eating each other thing, well, that technically would kind of end up, if the narratives were mixed in, kind of fitting in with the whole cannibalistic narrative. Because if polar bears were going to be eating each other very desperately, then therefore it would have to suggest that there is a much more bigger population number than much of the media is telling us about declining polar bears and being very few left.
Yeah, they would have a hard time finding each other, right?
Yeah.
And I think also for a polar bear, it would be very hard to eat another polar bear because they have claws and they're predators both. So you can better go for a seal. It's kind of supposed that all the seals are gone, but there are plenty of polar bears left, apparently. Which is also kind of unreasonable. Usually these things stay together. If you don't have a lot of seals anymore, you get less polar bears. But if you have a lot of seals, then you get a lot of polar bears. But the situation in nature that all the seals are gone, but there's all these polar bears that are like, what are we eating here? What is on our diet today? That is quite unnatural.
And it for me also feels like a bit of a test, like how much fake news is the public willing to accept? How far can we take this, right? That's the feeling I get from that.
Yeah, sometimes you wonder if it is indeed some hot air balloon they let fly and see if we can get away with this.
Well, it kind of this whole agenda sort of reminds me of. But I did look up some YouTube videos about it, particularly about the climate agenda, like from Mark Windows and Windows in the World, for example. He did this particular episode last year that was kind of epic, although it nearly lasted about 2 hours. We called Extinction Rebellion: The Facts, and he kind of exposed how the climate agenda was sort of linked with UN Agendas 21-2030, and it's kind of mind-blowing actually. And one of the main sources he linked the listenership and viewership to was page 75 of a book by an elite so-called think tank called the Club of Rome, called The First Global Revolution. Now, I'm going to quote exactly what it says, because I've got it in the screenshot on the iPad here of what it said on page 75, and it's called The Common Enemy of Humanity is Man. And it sort of reads as follows here. In searching for a common enemy against whom we can unite, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine, and the like would fit the bill. In their totality and their interactions, these phenomena do constitute a common threat which must be confronted by everyone together. But in designating these dangers as the enemy, we fall into the trap which we have already warned readers about, namely mistaking symptoms for causes. All these dangers are caused by human intervention in natural processes, and it is only through changed attitudes and behaviour that they can be overcome. The real enemy then is humanity itself. And it kind of does end up linking in within this whole climate agenda with the mainstream media saying, well, humans are to blame, we got to demonise them and go after them. And some of the solutions get pushed of, well, we need to have your cars and your vans and trucks ditched in order for electric ones, which are not always readily available on the free market and can be expensive. And last time I checked in the town I lived in, I mean, electric vehicles would only make up at best maybe 6% of the overall cars that are there, even though there are much more electric charging points available. And bear in mind the charging points not always everywhere you go. But there is some idea that people would say just put them on the smart grid, which is another kind of Orwellian intrusive thing to intrude into your privacy so that the government can track if you're charging your car. Well, main things get pushed off. Well, we've got to actually, therefore, I mean, even people here in Scotland especially kind of more sceptical of the public transport because it doesn't always go everywhere and the trains and the buses are not always that reliable. But it's kind of strange at the same time they accept the climate change narrative, where they kind of accept that, from one example of a community council meeting I attended in the local town I'm in, when I challenged the people on there who were in charge, they were kind of suggesting, so I said to them, well, are you suggesting that that you should force people to ditch their cars in order to go on the trains? And they kind of ended up nodding away as if to go, well, that might have to be the case. And kind of as a shock, really, because the whole climate agenda really is not actually to solve a changing climate, as much as I do believe it is changing, but going into the bit of the conspiracy world, it kind of is changing in many other ways, like with chemtrails and geoengineering, but they will never discuss that. Because why? Because they'll probably end up calling you, no doubt, in the nick of time, a tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorist. so many people actually.
But I wonder if that starts wearing off, like racist and bigot and sexist and whatever they have. At some point, science denier and tinfoil
climate denier.
It wears off.
Yeah, but that's I grew up in the 90s, right? And in the 90s, you are like sort of a left-wing hippie when you're vegetarian and you're all about the climate and the environment and nature. And I think since Al Gore's movie An Inconvenient Truth in 2006, this climate activists have actually found their voice. They now know how to frame their story in order for a big audience to follow them. They've learned to just play into the fears of common people. And for example, for the Netherlands, that means that they stress continuously that the sea level will rise and the levees will break, right? And the half of the country will overflood. So that's sort of a realistic fear for a lot of people. And in that way, that's a story that sticks.
Well, the main solutions that would then get pushed afterwards, I mean, I did hear about this from Mark Windows himself, was some places would be, if they were subject to the rise of sea levels, would be subject to so-called decommissioning. Where I did hear about this one case in a in a coastal village in Wales called Fairborn, which is located just literally southwest of the Snowdonia National Park, where there's been so much decommissioning going on. Mark Windows did visit there, see what the villagers are doing. One of the solutions the local council there took was to hike up a lot of the parking charges, because they said it was in the name of, fighting climate change. And what happened was local businesses ended up suffering as a result, because people were hesitant to go into that village to park the cars there. And because it was a designated area, because, well, you better not go there because the sea levels are going to rise. And it kind of reminds me of this one American billionaire lives in the UK. I think he's known to be quite a big New Yorker, because he is a typical New Yorker as well. And he did say at this one point, if the sea levels really were going to rise, and the banks therefore would have to stop trading in certain places, both like the Netherlands as well as within London, because the sea levels were projected to rise, if at the minimum was in 10 years. And basically he said, if your property is on the seafront in certain places, like, sometimes my family and I take holiday to a small tiny village in Scotland called Inverness in the south coast of Scotland. And if that was to be the case, then all of the homes and caravans, because there's a good holiday business that's there, would end up with, in his words, be basically worth F all, because it's basically a case of good luck trying to sell your home if you're in that place, because you will not be getting any money if you try to sell it there. And the banks already know this.
Yes, true.
But
my mom lives in an island in the Galway area, and that's where you see a lot of rich people buying there. But once in a year they have the bay is flooding, because of the spring tide, I think it's called.
Tide.
No doubt because of the storms as well.
Yeah, a lot of the sea level is rising, and a lot of houses are flooded. But yet they keep on buying properties there, and there are even billionaires from the US are buying a villa there, or
Yeah, I think the prices revealed that there's no issue.
No. And they have better numbers. They know how to make money. They are more careful with their money, and yet they buy houses. Yeah.
Also, by the way, in this article about this cannibalism among polar bears, it says...
this topic. Yeah.
No, it's the same article, but it says...
It's still there, yeah.
The researcher does not come with concrete numbers. His so that is already, I think, suspicious.
Out of the tongue.
That his pronouncements are predominantly based on reports of eyewitnesses. And then Mort Vitsev, that's the person doing it, admits that the sightings of cannibalism could be the consequence of the fact that more and more people live in the North Pole region, and therefore more of these sightings are done. Now we do not only get information of scientists, but also of a growing number of oil industry and defense employees. So yeah, that does not show in the title. This
no, so he sort of debunks his own research there.
Yeah, but if you just read the title, then yeah.
Yeah, but that's like this is sort of a nonsense message, right? That at first, well, it may be the case, but it also may be that it's not the case, right? And there are different factors
the case,
at
but
play.
we don't have any numbers, and it could be because we have more people citing it. That increases the amount of sightings.
This is from the famous Dutch website nu.nl.
Go Yoshi.
Yoshi is a big fan of this.
You are not allowed to deny their opinion on climate change, so this is the kind of articles you will get from them.
Yeah. And you want to go to the comment section to deny it, and then damn it, not allowed.
Not allowed. Your profile is going to be deleted.
Yeah. But still, I think you talked about raising the parking fees, like in the whale story, right? Actually, frustrating the local economy might have a really good real-time effect on the environment, because that's what our next message is about. That the outbreak of the coronavirus has had an unexpected effect. That the emission of what you call it,
carbon dioxide.
Carbon dioxide.
Why the fuck are you talking English?
Why the fuck are you talking English? From Ron. Oh yeah, he just fell into the podcast and didn't hear the.
With your nose into the butter.
It's because our guest is from Scotland, Ron.
Yeah, Ron, our guest is from Scotland. Yeah, that's why. But continue, Rick.
Yeah, it's like the outbreak of the coronavirus has had an unexpected effect. So the emissions of nitrous dioxide and carbon dioxide has dropped significantly in China, because the economy there has, of course, been highly frustrated by lockdowns of entire cities. And this is a measurement from a Belgian institution for space aeronautics, and they actually showed a map from that. Like in December, you see a large red blob on it that shows, of course, the amount of emissions. And then they show this map of the same region. But then from the end of January, and then you see an almost white map. So it's pretty effective to lock down entire cities. Of course, the thing you need to do there is frustrate the entire economy, but then you reach your goal, right?
Yeah. If you kill all these people, it would also help a lot.
Right. I once, like this is anecdotal, but I once had a friend that had an extreme metal band called DREP. It's called Drastic Reduction of Earth's Population, and that might be the goal that we need to reach here, right? If you have maybe 1/10 of the Earth's population, then a lot of problems would be solved at the same time.
I would think
how to reach that goal.
Yeah. Also, Trump was very worried always about the trade deficit with China. Because they exported much more to the United States than the other way around, and now it is all zero, then he has a trade balance. I wonder if he will be happy with this. I don't think so.
I don't know, and maybe it shows in the American economy now as well, right? I don't know what effect this has.
Yeah, I think this the supply chain is just broken, and all the American businesses run on 80% is consumption anyway, and that is all produced in China. Mm-hmm. And the rest, if you want to make any kind of car or something, you need Chinese parts. Mm-hmm. And there's no Chinese parts coming, so I wonder. This will be very bad for American economy. I think that's also the reason why the stock market is going down so much.
Yeah, as I understand it, the inoculation for this coronavirus, the number 19, as I understand it, what is named now, COVID-19, that it still would take 1.5 years to actually develop. So it's not nearly there yet. So it might be that this sort of health crisis might take quite a long time. So it may have a large effect on the world economy.
Mm-hmm. Not just develop a vaccine, but also be able to mass produce it. It will take quite some time, I think. And definitely, if you go through all the of testing it for the government regulation. Mm-hmm. But strangely enough, that in October, just before this outbreak, there was in New York a simulation called Event 201. And it was organized by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, by Johns Hopkins University, and the World Economic Forum. And they discussed exactly this, a virus outbreak, and they actually named the coronavirus also, and what they would need to do to combat that. And of course, it was very much virus don't know borders. So we need some global agreement that overrides national government to be able to deal with this. That is the same thing as climate change, of course. So climate change does not have borders. We need a global power structure, and they discussed ways to circumvent all kind of regulations and to get all the objections, more or less get a carte blanche when this would occur to override local government. So I thought it was very interesting. It was just a month before the outbreak.
Uh-huh. So, almost like it was a planned event, right?
Sorry?
Almost like it was a planned event, and that they were actually aiming for a world government.
And actually, in the Wall Street Journal, they interviewed the same people who were at that event, and they say the same things they said at that event.
Damn it.
That is quite astounding.
And I heard an expert explaining on television what the coronavirus was and who would be affected by it and who not. It's just like a fever, only elder people die and some weak, sick diabetes people might die. But the people like us, they will just survive. It's just like a fever. So why should we?
It was the same with SARS and the Mexican flu, right? It's not entirely.
The Y2K bug and.
And the Zika, remember the Zika with the babies with the big heads. There's all kind of people panicking over it, and usually it's just bullshit. But I have to say,
by the way, was
this
also
one I also find quite scary. Mm-hmm. Sorry, Joshi.
The Zika virus was also related to the Gates Foundation, I believe. When that came out, there was also mentioning of that it was. I don't know.
Gates is very involved in everything vaccine related, so I would expect his fingers everywhere on any vaccine project.
Yeah, it has to make a profit with the charity, yeah.
But the thing is that whatever happens in the world, governments they always benefit. They benefit if they make their own mistakes. They benefit if some story is blown up. It always legitimizes more regulation and more government influence in some way. I don't know where this logic comes from, but it's very.
Success is failure. Is one of these Orwellian things that our euro failed, but that proves only that we need more power and we need a fiscal union and we need a banking union and we need a union and we need a police union and if we had that, then the euro would have been a success. So yeah.
Yeah, then they discussed as well during the drills you mentioned, Peter, about trying to silence so-called conspiracy theories about the virus and vaccines as well, because I did hear from certain sources about that as well, particularly from when David Icke is still active to this day. He actually did read out a statement about it, and it's kind of coincidental that the UK now wants to actually criminalise plans to criminalise so-called anti-vaccine propaganda, which would be sort of on par with the way certain things, including hate speech, are dealt with, because mainly the main reason for it is to try and silence any form of dissent from particularly people that end up raising any form of concerns with regards to particularly the chemicals within the vaccine. I know I'm learning into controversial territory here, although it's guaranteed I might not be able to get away with it even if I'm high-functioning autistic to talk about it. But it seems as if there definitely is an agenda planned from that, and you did highlight correctly, Peter, that it was kind of planned from the beginning to not only have this type of event, but to then push the ideal solution of trying to take away even more of our freedoms and rely on the government more as a result.
Yeah, it was discussed at this event 201 meeting also how to control the social media, because evil rumors would spread, and they had this simulation, and in their simulation it started in South America, so it was a little bit different. But the interesting thing was that one of the conspiracy theories that they had to fight in this simulation was that evil voices said that this virus was brought into the world by pharmaceuticals in order to profit from it. And that was one of the conspiracies they had to fight, and they had to they also want the carte blanche of the social media that immediately conspiracy theories had to be removed, which was kind of strange because with this real outbreak in the beginning there was a story. It came from a food market, but then later that was discredited, and I think Zero Hedge wrote the article that there's also the only level 4 biolab in China is in the same area.
Yeah.
It's a few miles away from this food market, so they suggest maybe it is escaped from this biolab, and they immediately got banned from Twitter, Zero Hedge. So I was also kind of, and later that was taken over by the mainstream media, and this story, and even though Zero Hedge has never returned, banned for life from Twitter. But it's strange that with this simulation 201 they discuss how to who control the social media and fight conspiracy theories, and then in the real event this is also being done.
You got any more points to discuss as well? Because it's just that the reason I muted my microphone in the background a few minutes ago is because my folks are kind of begging me to try and see if I can get off as soon as possible to basically help out with them throughout the rest of the house. And plus it's getting close to about night time where I'm at 25 to 10. So is there anything more that's due to be there? I'm sorry if I have to maybe end it a bit early.
We have 2 more messages, so...
Yeah. Just a few short ones. Police news. This is a very short one, a bit comical. Police seizes baseball bat. Oh dear, it's
There was a social media post by a Rotterdam. Schiedam. That's the same in English, right? He posted on social media that he participated in a legal action to confiscate criminal money and things like that. Let's call it like that. He seized what he calls a baseball bat, but it was actually a pepper mill, which had the shape And his comment on social media was, "This is we cannot tolerate it, so we are going to demolish it with pleasure."
Yeah, because you could just as easily smash somebody's head in with it, right? So nobody gets to own a big pepper mill anymore.
Yeah.
In it, and pepper spray is also an illegal weapon. The pepper alone is reason to confiscate, steal the whole thing.
Yep. And at the same time, they collected third. Sorry.
Jordan?
Yeah, because apparently the idea of trying to fake your address is 24 Sesame Street doesn't really help things with the background checks at all.
No, but at the same time, they confiscated like 30,000 euros of tax money that he still needed to pay, and he had 6 fines still running. So they had some other things to arrange there, right? So they needed a reason to get inside, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So beware.
Beware pepper mill owners.
Yeah, beware pepper mill owners. Another news from the police department. This is from the Justice Department. Even kijken hoor. Even kijken. Is investigating the use of commercial DNA databases. Yeah.
In cases, right?
Yeah, for cold cases.
Yeah, so they have a crime and they cannot. They are stuck.
Yeah.
And then they want to use the DNA that is stored in commercial databases, which is like you send your DNA to 23andMe to find out your ethical background or something. A lot of people did this, and now you're a suspected criminal because when you're in the database, you're easier to label as a criminal.
Yeah,
they need someone.
And of course,
although
he did.
I heard
Oh, sorry. Let's go ahead.
I heard someone say that they want to use it to find the region of someone. So the DNA could determine if you're you have a criminal and you look at the DNA, you give it to these commercial data banks, and then they say it's someone from Belarus or something, or someone from Eastern Europe, or. But yeah, you already see here that Grapperhaus, the minister, says there are risks on this method. Private genealogical DNA are made for a different purpose than for the police. So of course we have to be very careful, and we have to be very concerned that this does not go wrong. Of course, with the greatest caution. And 2 years later, all the data is on the street. Probably it's leaked and available for sale on the internet. And then they have questions in the parliament like, okay, we have responsibility. It has to be taken, and the gravest concern. And
this is just a boiling frog strategy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, wouldn't the DNA possibly end up being faked or even planted as well? Because that could possibly happen with regards to lost DNA as well from nearly or every citizen there is.
Sure, you mean the DNA from a criminal being put into the data bank, or
even if it's just maybe somebody that's not genuinely a criminal whatsoever, but they found maybe the mandatory DNA biometric scanning, and if it's particularly somebody that speaks out against the state, and they end up having some people that were maybe, you never know, get hired by the state to stage a crime or even just place, they can have the ability, if the DNA is stored, to place the DNA on the planted victim. So therefore, they can just therefore have the justification and say, well, the DNA is on the victim, therefore this person we have arrested is responsible for the crime.
They don't even have to put kiddie porn on anymore to fake you as a criminal. They can just
it's
like that.
it's a totally believable story for the public at large, right? So there's no real problem with that in regards of framing somebody who's innocent.
Because if you say DNA, then everyone already believes it's a shutdown. It's a done case. It's So if you have
the general public, they just want somebody to blame. They don't really care if the person actually did it or not.
Yeah, but I think for the police and the Justice Department, it's even more the case. They just want the case closed, and the first best person they can nail it on, they take. You hear, especially in the States, you hear this a lot.
But I think this strategy that makes it easier to prevent an uprising, that like what happened with several earlier cases where the proof wasn't actually found or somebody else did it, and the person ended up being in jail in the Netherlands for say 10 or 12 years or so, and he didn't actually do anything. Now you can just plant the DNA there and say, well, he actually did do something, right? And he would still be innocent, but the proof would be there.
Sometimes it's surprising also with this Iraq weapons of mass destruction. I was always surprised that they invade Iraq and they actually admitted there were no weapons of mass destruction. So I would have also thought they would have planted some weapons of mass destruction there just to but they still didn't dare to do that.
And the story that those things would be planted would sound so ridiculous to a lot of people that they would call you a conspiracy theorist.
Same if it's even done with the white helmets planting the chemical weapons in Syria as well.
That's a very dubious organization, this white helmet. Like Bellingcat.
But we are at the end of the show, and it's very late. And Jordan, before we end, maybe you have a web blog.
So to talk about the blog.
Yeah.
Well, at least name the address so we can find it.
So people can look for it.
Okay, well, there's several places that I do have my stuff on. Well, I mainly use this alternative sites like in terms of posting videos, certain places. The crisp one rapping in the background. I do go into places like BitChute, Brighteon.com, as well as Joshua TV, and also Steam it along with DTube. And that's with the username Jonathan R 1994 with the capital R in the middle. And I go into, I only use certain blogs like Jairini94.wix.com/John Litpicker with regards to talking about mainly environmental things, but I don't talk about anything else really. But with regards to other written social media sites, I also use places like Gab, Minds.com, as well as I even use Steemit as well with the same name because I can write certain things on there. With Gab, it's Jonathan R 2094. On Minds.com, it's John the Binman R 94, which is kind of spelt funny, but many people hopefully get used to it. So hopefully many people can maybe even, I've also used Telegram as well, so hopefully they can go into certain places on there, but can maybe be more than happy to leave the links we've used to help share it out.
So if we want information on the libertarian insights on the Scottish situation, those are the places to go.
People can also hopefully, and also if they wanted to visit the Scottish Libertarian Party website as well, which is www.scottishlibertarians.com. They also have a Facebook page. I mean, I know Anthony Samarov, along with the party leader Tam Laird, host a podcast on YouTube called the Scottish Liberty Podcast, which they do so all the time. They can just easily search for it on YouTube, just type in Scottish Liberty Podcast, and up it comes. They can view any episode from there. And those two guys, I've hung out with them a few times, and they're absolutely some of the most coolest you ever meet. They're absolutely great to hang out with. And Anthony Samarov, I mean, he's an expert debater. I mean, he could basically be quite a big, I'd use the term again, expert in trying to debunk anybody, even the particular ones that want more government, especially.
I have an idea. Maybe you can send me all the URLs in a post to me, then I post it below the show. So people can click on it and just find your weblogs. And,
Yeah, hopefully I can send it soon afterwards after the broadcast ends.
yeah. Okay, thanks very much, and
Thank you.
Everybody for listening, and of course Rick, Peter, and Yoshi and Jordan for contributing to the show, and me of course for trying to talk English. I hope you understand what I'm saying. Okay, see you all next week, and this is the end tune. Hartstikke idee, hoppakee. I see nothing going again. Hey. Ah, well, no end tune.
Just put it in later, right?
Yeah, nothing is happening.
If it's still recording, hopefully I can direct people to my Twitter account as well, which is also at JonathanR1994 as well. I mean, is it still recording? Yeah, hopefully people could have picked up on that as well. I'll send a link to that as well. I did briefly quit Twitter a long time ago along with Facebook. Well, Facebook permanently because of the way it's acting with data breaches and censorship and that. But with Twitter, I kind of in the mindset of, well, I don't care if Twitter ends up banning me. At least I've probably had a good time and a good life on there. At least if someone ends up finding something offensive and I get banned, well, unfortunately, that's tough titty for anybody else if they would sort of expect Twitter to be this free speech place.
Yeah. Yeah, and the end tune doesn't want to come. It's weird.
I think you'll have to edit it in later, right?
Yeah. Well, never mind. Okay, see you all next week. And
have a good evening. Bye-bye.
You too as well. I'll just cut this off for now.
Yep. Sure.
Right, bye then.
Bye-bye.